Welcome to The Explainer. Today, we're digging into a book that's been called one of the most influential and, controversial novels in all of American history. I'm talking, of course, about Harriet Beecher Stowe's Uncle Tom's Cabin.
Okay, so when this book came out in 1852, it wasn't just a hit, it was an absolute phenomenon. I mean, get this, in its first year, this anti-slavery novel sold a mind-blowing 1.5 million copies all around the world. To put that into perspective for you, it was the best-selling novel of the entire 19th century, right behind the Bible. That's just incredible.
The book's impact was so powerful, so immediate, that the story goes a decade later, right in the middle of the Civil War. Harriet Beecher Stowe finally meets President Abraham Lincoln. And what does he say to her? Well, he reportedly greets her with these famous and kind of legendary words.
Which really makes you wonder, right? How on earth could a single work of fiction have that kind of explosive impact? How could it fan the flames that pushed a nation into its deadliest war? Well, to get to the bottom of that, we've got to rewind a bit and really look at the America this book was born into. So picture this. It's the 1850s, and America is basically a powder keg. The whole country is being torn apart by the issue of slavery. And you have to understand, this wasn't just some political debate. It was a massive economic engine and a social system that was woven into the very fabric of the nation.
And then, things hit a boiling point with the Fugitive Slave Act of 1850. This law was a real game changer. It didn't just make it harder for enslaved people to escape. No, it made it so that people in the free northern states were legally forced to participate. I mean, you could be punished for not helping to capture and return someone who had escaped. All of a sudden, slavery wasn't just some far-off southern problem. It was everybody's problem. A true national crisis.
And this is where Harriet Beecher Stowe comes into the picture. She was an abolitionist, a writer, a mom of 6, and she was absolutely furious about this new law. She felt this deep moral and, religious calling to do something. The story goes that her sister-in-law wrote to her and said, "If I could use a pen as you can, I would write something that would make this whole nation feel what an accursed thing slavery is." And that's exactly what Stowe set out to do.
Now, here's what was so brilliant about her approach. She didn't write some boring political essay that nobody would read. Nope. She wrote what was called a sentimental novel. And the whole point of that was to skip right past the politics and the debates and aim directly for the heart. Her goal was to make people feel the horror of slavery, to make it real and personal, not just some abstract idea.
And the way she did this was just masterful. The whole story is built around these two parallel paths, following two enslaved people from the same farm in Kentucky. And their journeys show two completely different ways of responding to the nightmare they're in, one of quiet, faithful endurance, and the other of fierce, desperate resistance.
And this contrast, it's really the heart and soul of the whole book. On one hand, you have Uncle Tom. He's deeply religious, and his faith guides him down this path that ends in martyrdom. But then you have Eliza, and when she finds out her son is going to be sold, something just snaps. That motherly instinct kicks in, and she'll do absolutely anything, risk everything, to get him to freedom. By showing these two paths, Stowe makes this powerful point. It doesn't matter if you're faithful or if you fight back. The system of slavery is designed to crush you either way.
So, what happened when the book was released? Well, it wasn't just a ripple. It was a full-blown cultural earthquake. The book didn't just get people talking. It lit a political and social firestorm that grew bigger with every single copy that was sold.
The reaction was just instantaneous and totally explosive. Up in the North, it was like a massive wake-up call. It turned people who were kind of on the fence into full-blown, passionate abolitionists. But down in the South, whoa, it was seen as a direct attack. The book was banned, people held public bonfires to burn it, and they called it nothing but lies and propaganda. And its reach went way beyond America. It became an international sensation, fueling the anti-slavery movement in places like Britain, and even finding an audience in Russia, where they were dealing with their own system of serfdom.
And this gets to the very core of why the book was so powerful. It wasn't about dry laws or numbers. It was about human beings. I mean, think about that incredible scene of Eliza leaping across the icy river, clutching her child. That image became totally iconic. It was burned into people's minds, not just from reading the book, but from seeing it in tons of plays. It took something like the Fugitive Slave Act, which is just words on paper, and showed people the brutal, heartbreaking reality of it. It made it personal.
But the story doesn't just end with the Civil War. Not by a long shot. As time went on, the book's legacy got a whole lot more complicated. And the way we look at it today, It's changed a lot. Which brings us to the critique.
So here's the central, really difficult question we have to grapple with today. How did the most famous anti-slavery book in history also end up creating some of the most harmful and long-lasting racial stereotypes? It's a huge paradox. The same characters that Stowe designed to make people feel sympathy are now pointed to as the source of these damaging caricatures.
Later critics, like the brilliant writer James Baldwin, really laid this out. They argued that even with her good intentions, Stowe's novel ended up pushing a very simplistic and, frankly, racist view of black people. It cemented these character types into the culture. You've got the overly subservient Uncle Tom, the wild, uncivilized child Topsy, and the tragic mulatto character Eliza, whose lighter skin was pretty clearly used to make her seem more relatable to white readers at the time. And these weren't just in the book, they were exaggerated and spread everywhere through all those stage plays and minstrel shows sticking around for decades.
And maybe the most shocking result of all this is what happened to the main character's name. Think about it. Stowe created Uncle Tom to be a hero, a kind of Christ-like figure who literally dies resisting slavery. But today, the term Uncle Tom is a deeply offensive insult. It's used to describe a black person who is seen as way too subservient to white people. It's a total 180-degree flip from what Stowe intended.
And yet, even with all these very real and very important criticisms, you can't just toss the book aside. We have to remember how radical it was for its time. Stowe wasn't just saying, oh, some slave owners are bad. No, her argument was that the entire system was evil. As she says right there in the book, you can talk about the abuses of slavery all you want, but that's missing the point. The thing itself is the abuse. For her, there was no such thing as a good slave owner.
So that leaves us here with this incredibly complicated legacy. On one hand, you have a book that absolutely played a role in ending the monstrous institution of slavery. But on the other hand, did it do that by creating racial stereotypes that have caused harm for over a century? It leaves us with a really tough question, one that doesn't have an easy answer. Can a single story do immense good and also immense harm all at the same time? That's the messy, challenging truth of the book that helped start a war.